Hi everyone, welcome to Module 2 of SWK685. Today we're going to be reviewing psychoeducation, caregiver skills, and alternate models of treatment. I want to let you know that I'm not going to go through every slide today. So please make sure you review all of the slides, the information on them, and click any links that are on them. And the reason I'm not going to go through all of them is because there are some topics in here that I would want to give you anecdotes for. So it's really important in trauma-informed care to not only know the information, but to understand how it's applied, right? We work with people. We need to understand how it's applied. So again, please go through all of the slides, look at all of the information. If you have questions about something that I did not talk about, please feel free to send me an email and we'll jump on that, okay? Also, if you noticed, I said caregiver skills and not parenting skills. We don't all work with bio parents. I work with foster youth and foster parents. And in order to provide a trauma-informed lens for my foster children who often do not want their foster parents to be called parents, I often use the word caregiver. So just like we talked about assessment being a continuous thing throughout treatment last week, psychoeducation is also a continuous thing. I love this for a couple different reasons. First of all, as we get to look further and further into TFCBT and its different phases, you will see how it's just like built so beautifully that we can psychoeducate on each additional phase. And the next phase builds on the phase before it. Also, this allows us to not overwhelm our caregivers or our youth when we are providing them with information. It's a lot. We can't give it to them all in one session, 2 sessions. Like, we are providing psychoeducation through the whole course of the modality. And the goal is to dispel myths and increase parent engagement, right? So there are different components to psychoeducation. First component is normalization. Now, honestly, if you look at the components that come underneath it, providing general information about the event, information about common emotional and social responses. What do those do? If we provide that information, what does it do? It normalizes it, right? So those are kind of like together. We also want to inform about the child's diagnosis. So sometimes it's explaining how they met criteria. And then we also want to inform about the treatment modality we're using, which TFCBT is what we're talking about here, and the strategies for that. So I talked last little thingamajigger about including our caregivers and our youth in our treatment planning because it provides autonomy, but also it is a perfect opportunity for psychoeducation. I also mentioned last week that TFCBT is only suitable for children older than the age of 3 and up until the age of 18. Sometimes, just depending on where our youth are cognitively, or even just like their emotional awareness, we may need to speak with a parent first about the modality, right? What we're going to do before we fold that youth into the discussion of the modality. And often it looks like things about explaining them why they're coming to talk to you, not to deal with big feelings or to deal with something scary that happened. Some youth are completely aware that they've experienced traumas. Other youth are not aware that their experiences would be considered traumatic experiences at all, or they experience them when they're too young to consciously remember that they had these experiences. We do use children's books a lot. Not only do I use them with the children, but I also use them with the caregivers. Because, number one, by utilizing this book with the caregiver, we are empowering them to take the book or take the story, right, and do it themselves at home. with the youth that they're working with. This book up here, A Terrible Thing Happened. Love that book. And let me tell you why. Because in that book, I can't remember that raccoon's name right now. It's not sticking. It never says what the terrible thing is. So do you know what happens sometimes? A youth will assume it's the same terrible thing that they've experienced. And maybe this youth hasn't said anything about what they've experienced, right? And we use this book as a form of gradual exposure, which we'll talk about later on in different phases of TFCBT. But you use this book, and if we observe and assess, often we can find out what trauma they experienced just by their response to this book. It also normalizes it that it happens to other people. And this book is awesome because it talks about trauma symptoms. It's not bad behaviors, right? This little raccoon isn't bad. It's trauma symptoms. Here are some additional resources here. We can use the cup imagery. That's actually a really fun one to do with smaller youth. Just make sure you have like something to catch the water in. We can use the wound one. You kind of really have to know your youth and their caregiver if you're explaining it at the same time. But one that I really like to use with my teenagers, and it's kind of gross, but they really, really get it. I like to use vomit. So stay with me, okay? So trauma, right? I wish I could sing something like trauma. We're like holding it right here. We already know from last semester that we hold it in our body, right? And part of the psychoeducation we would be giving them is the way that trauma holds in their body, right? So you hold it in your body, right? Like something sour in your stomach. And when you get a trauma reminder, you're poked. And you burp. You know what burp is, right? Like a mix between vomit and burp. And you burp. And you taste it. And it's disgusting. And it burns out of your throat. So you swallow it back down. And you let it back down there. And you get poked again. And you burp again. And you swallow it back down. And I say, you know what? Like, what would happen if when that trauma got poked, you just let it all out? It's like when you feel sick to your stomach, like for real life, and you finally vomit. Like, describe to me how you feel afterwards. And they'll be like, well, I feel better. I was like, yeah, you feel better. I was like, did you enjoy vomiting? And they'll look at me like I have 5 heads. And they'll be like, no, I didn't enjoy vomiting. But you felt better when you were done. Yeah. So it's not going to be enjoyable recalling these traumas, right? No, it's going to burn your throat. It's going to come out your nose. Somebody's going to have to hold your hair back for you, right? But you're going to feel better when you're done. That one really, really sticks with people. Caregiver skills. Here's why I laugh. This can be so, so, so hard to communicate with some of our caregivers. And here's an opportunity for us as helpers who engage with both caregivers and youth, that the caregiver that we're engaging with, they have their own story, right? They have their own family system that they came from. They were raised a certain way. And so we have to remember that when we are trying to educate our caregivers on different caregiver skills that might be honest to God in direct opposition from what they knew growing up. So we have to teach them how to praise, very specific praise, right away and every time they do that behavior. We have to teach them selective attention, so ignoring negative behaviors, how to execute timeout, and then we have to teach them about behavior charts. So I'm going to tell a story about selective attention. This is a really funny story, actually. So I was working with a foster youth who was 9, and her foster father who stayed at home with them during the pandemic. And the foster youth was having pretty severe escalations of physical and verbal aggression. She'd been hospitalized numerous times. It was one afternoon, we're sitting out on the back porch. I'm talking with Dad, going through some psychoeducation on why this youth is experiencing certain trauma symptoms. We're going through the hand brain. We're talking about the amygdala. We're talking about skills he can assist youth with and engaging the prefrontal cortex, all those things we talked about in the first part of this course. And the youth comes out and she starts cursing. And I'm not talking about like in the high school hallway cursing. I'm talking about like biker bar cursing. I don't know how else to say it. Hardcore curse words. Hardcore sexually explicit curse words. And also calling us these curse words. And I'm just ignoring her, right? Like I acknowledged her when she came out, like, hey, so-and-so, thanks for coming out with us. And then I continued my conversation. And I seriously was just ignoring her. And the foster dad was getting more and more and more agitated. And how can you let her talk like this? She needs to stop it. She needs to stop it now. And I just looked at him and I said, so-and-so, is she hurting herself? No. Is she hurting someone else? No. Is she damaging property? No. Then I don't care. And it was really difficult for him to understand. And that wasn't the first or the last conversation we had about ignoring. Because to him, ignoring meant approving. And it didn't. Because we had to teach him that ignoring was not approving, but it was withholding the attention that that youth was seeking through those behaviors. So some examples of the methods we just talked about before to make them have positive outcomes is that there has to be consistency among all caregivers. And then we have to look at, like, what's the expectation for this child? They're, like it says here, 3-year-olds typically need help calming down. That's an acceptable expectation. And then we need to use encouraging words that are not deficit-based. So not fault-based. Doesn't point out the faults of the child. We need to model parenting techniques or caregiver techniques. So when we're working with the caregiver and the adults, or the youth, I'm sorry, together, we need to make sure that we are encouraging them and the same way we want them to praise and encourage the youth. Oh, extinction burst. What is it? Okay, extinction burst is totally cool. So this is when a child, this occurs when the child experiences a change in contingency reinforcement. So, like, this is what it looked like. So let's say a parent says, we need to withhold screen time until you finished your homework. A caregiver says that. Well, what we're going to see is kind of like this escalation, right, in behaviors. So because we are using screen time as a motivation to complete homework, when the homework isn't completed and the child loses screen time, what are we going to see? Escalations, right? So we want to explain to them that escalations, when they're implementing new tactics, should be expected. And then we also need to remember that big emotions and big praise get their attention. Go ahead and look through parent-child interactive therapy. There are lots of really good resources for this, and it's something that parents can take the tools and skills they've learned from this and use them at home. Same with EMDR. Actually, I did a project on this in grad school and totally loved it. It's absolutely fascinating. Please look into it, but also remember that you must be certified to administer EMDR. 1-2-3 Magic is a very, very simple yet effective tool that you can use with children. And then also the Incredible Years. I just wanted to remind you all that, okay, we have chapters 6 through 7 which are due at 11:59 on Sunday. I also sent out an announcement letting everyone know that for core projects, I'm opening up the assignment 2 weeks ahead of time. Please remember, if you have any questions or need any assistance, please just reach out to me. Make sure you all are taking care of yourself, taking time to breathe, and we're going to do fantastic. I hope you all have a fantastic week, or at least the week that you need, and I'll talk to you all for Module 3. Bye!